This is the field of 68. I'm Vince Wolfram.
I'm JoJo Cavanagh in Auburn, Alabama. And this
is Straight Out the Jungle. Welcome back to Straight Out the Jungle. My name is Vince Wolfram.
And I'm JoJo Cavanagh.
And no Broome, no problem for the newly ranked #1 Auburn basketball Tigers, as Chad Baker-Mazara and Chaney Johnson became the newest duo on the block, helping Auburn beat number 15 Mississippi State 88-66 on Tuesday night in its first game without their star player, Johni Broome. First off, just to get it off the jump, how about the Auburn jungle tonight?
Wore this
He's
sweatshirt.
Repping it.
Wore this sweatshirt. I know it's the football jungle, but still wore this sweatshirt in honor. The jungle showed up. I mean, we saw that line in the village. Like someone said it was like 14,000 people. It literally looked like that. That atmosphere helped 100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out Auburn family, Auburn students for showing up for the #1 team because it sounded crazy.
The 63rd straight sellout at Neville Arena with a crowd of 9,121. It was the largest student crowd in the jungle for the first time since the 2021-22 season. And I didn't doubt that stat at all when I first saw it. They came rocking.
Yeah, no, I remember my freshman year was 2021-2022. Slept outside the Kentucky game. That jungle was packed. And it looked as packed. It was the #1 team in the country. And that now it's the #1 team in the country. So, and a 22-point win without Auburn's leading scorer, leading rebounder, All-American in a top 15 matchup nonetheless. So,
yeah, we expected, you and I both talked about before we hopped on, that we thought it would be a win. We didn't think it would be by that much. A dominant play from a lot of different characters on the Auburn roster. And the new duo, Shaggy and Scooby, Ernie and Bert, Donkey and Shrek, Chaney and Chad. I think that has to be a thing because they certainly were all over the floor tonight. I'll start with Chad Baker-Mazara. I mean, a fast start to say the least. He and Chaney combined for the first 14 points of this ball game. It was literally the Chaney and Chad show for the first 5-10 minutes. Like you felt like everything was coming from Chaney and Chad. Baker-Mazara really set the tone early, I thought, though. He scored 8 straight points, including a pair of 3-pointers to give Auburn a 10-0 lead. And he forced Mississippi State to call a timeout after just 2 minutes and 15 seconds. If I'm the opposing coach and I'm calling a timeout after 2 minutes and 15 seconds, that means everything is going wrong. And it was, because Chad Baker-Mazara was giving him a lot of problems. He finished with 20 points on the night, 8 of 11 shooting. I said 20 points on the night. 18 of those bad boys came in the first half, too. So, I mean, the first half was the Chad Baker-Mazara show. It started with Circus Baker-Mazara when he scored on that crazy, crazy shot. And he ended the half with Chad Buzzer Mazara. He hit it at the buzzer. You heard the sound go off. And, of course, you knew it was going in because that's just what Chad Baker-Mazara does. But a dominant first half from Chad. And you could see his impact was felt on so many different levels in this game.
Yeah, 20 points, season high for Chad Baker-Mazara. His season high before this game was 19 points against Georgia State. So when Auburn needs Chad Baker-Mazara without Johni Broome in both of those games, Chad Baker-Mazara was the one to step up. You called it. You said Chad Baker-Mazara is the one who is going to step up without Johni Broome. And that happened. He had 18 points in the first half, only 2 in the second half, but it didn't really matter. Auburn was throughout the whole game dominating, and you just felt his presence. His facial expressions also were so funny. He's going viral for the Tahad windmill dunk. You see Chad Baker-Mazara's facial expression right there. But just talking about, he stepped up when Johni Broome was out, and so did Chaney Johnson. Your pick was Chad Baker-Mazara. My pick was Chaney Johnson. And
we're on a roll.
First 14 points were Chad Baker-Mazara and Chaney Johnson. So, you know, we predict the future, guys. We don't just talk basketball. But it was Chaney Johnson's first start this season, 3rd in his Auburn career. He had 13 points in the first half. He ended up with 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 blocks. So Chaney Johnson and Chad Baker-Mazara showing up without Johni Broome. We were, not really so much worried. As we said, Mississippi State was more guard heavy, but you felt that with both of those guys in the paint. Tahad misses a 3. Chaney Johnson, it's 2 C's. We're getting confused here. Chaney Johnson, offensive rebound and scores. I've talked about that in the past. Offensive rebounds lead to scoring. Chaney Johnson is the one to do that. But just from both of those two to step up without Johni Broome is what Auburn needed. And especially Chaney Johnson, who usually comes off the bench, now as a starter, really showed, he is a starter.
Yeah, and there was plenty of parties in Auburn, Alabama that were searching for who was going to be the guy. The coaching staff, the players, the fans, the students, the staff. I feel like a lot of people were sort of curious on who would really step up. And from practice, I went to practice yesterday and just watched. They installed a lot of game offense for Chaney Johnson. And he stepped right up. Like it was another Chaney Johnson vintage performance where he gets the rock in his hands. He's going to do something good with it. And he did that all game. The offense that they ran for him was effective. They got him in his spots, which for Chaney Johnson to score, that's what he needs to do. I don't think, knock on wood, that I've ever seen Chaney Johnson miss a mid-range jumper, which that streak stayed true tonight. He was money from the mid-range. He was fantastic getting to the basket, attacking defenders. And another thing Bruce Pearl talked about was the bigs not getting in foul trouble. Against South Carolina, Chaney Johnson had 3 fouls in the first half and was really, really limited in minutes. He talked about them staying on the ground. I thought in the first half, Chaney Johnson had 2 feet planted for the majority of the first half. He was playing smart basketball on defense, and good defense fuels great offense. And it certainly did for Chaney Johnson. He was all over the boards. He was all over the offensive game. And I think in partnership with Chad, who Mississippi State had no match for, whether it was his energy, his jump shooting, his smack talk in the corner that caused some jungle words to come from the student section. They had no answer for either of those two. And I'm glad personally from who's going to step up standpoint that it wasn't just one guy, because that's a lot of pressure. If it was just Miles Kelly, if it was just Chaney Johnson, then we would expect it. As long as Johni Broome's out, we would expect Chaney Johnson to be the guy. But for it to be multiple guys and produce the amount that they did, I think it's a great thing and keeps us on a very refreshing pace going into SEC play and going into just this time spell without Johni Broome.
Yeah, the first half was dominated by Chad Baker-Mazara and Chaney Johnson, who Chad Baker-Mazara had 18 in the first half. Chaney had 13. Then in the second half, we kind of see Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Tahad. So really, everyone stepped up when it was their time. Like obviously, Chad Baker-Mazara had the first half, 18 points, but only had 2 in the second half. So it was up to other players to kind of step up. And like you said, it was well-rounded. It wasn't just from one player. At first, it may have looked like that with Chad and Chaney, but we'll talk about later. The second half, everyone kind of spread the wealth. And Chaney Johnson spoke after the game. He said, "For a team that's doing as well as we are and being number one, I feel like we still haven't reached our full potential yet."
Yeah,
so without your leading scorer, you win with 22 points. And we're hopefully going to see Johni Broome later on in this season. And I think Auburn is just going to be even better. I think, this team right now without Johni Broome, this is going to prepare them to be even better. So that when Johni Broome comes out, they are going to look even better than they did before.
No team can match the guard play of how deep Auburn is at that position. I mean, just think. Tahad Pettiford hasn't started a game in college basketball. That's absurd. That's insanity. Auburn's backcourt is so deep. That can play in any SEC game. We know we've seen Bruce do that. Oh my goodness, a Final Four run charged by guard play. You've seen it. I think that trend is going to continue. And Bruce talked about in his press conference on Monday, where he previewed this game, that he didn't know that this team was the best team in the country because of circumstances. Your best player's out, of course. Obviously, that puts you at a little bit of a disadvantage. You couldn't tell that at all tonight. And I'm sure Bruce, he's probably a little bit wowed himself that they showed up how they did without their star. And they did in the first half. I was so impressed by Auburn in the first half. The first 20 minutes were just exceptional. Compared to Saturday's game against South Carolina, I know you can attest, I was not hanging on to ropes for dear life, hoping that everything was going to be all right like I was in the first half in Columbia. It was a big, big switch up. I mean, Auburn was leading Mississippi State in every single major category in the first half. Field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, points off turnovers, defensive rebounds, points in the paint, fast break points, blocks, steals, assists. Literally all of those, Auburn was leading Mississippi State. And I think that makes for a great first half. I don't know who else would say it didn't. But what also helps is positive impact from everybody. We said Chaney Johnson and Chad managed the first 10 minutes, and then the second half that changed. There was no player with a plus-minus under 0. Miles Kelly, plus 23. Chaney, plus 21. Dylan, plus 13. Chad, plus 11. Everyone was making a positive impact on the game. And when that's the case, your team is going to produce. They shot just under 60% in the first half. That's absurd. You shoot 60%. And Johni Broome, if you think about how much he demands the ball because of how good he actually is and the easy buckets he gets in the paint, to be 60% without that guy and just the volume that he scores means that everyone else is taking a step up, which is so great to see at this point in conference play. Another thing, in Columbia, do you remember that free throw percentage number that was awfully scary? We shot 50% against South Carolina from the free throw line. Shot 83% today. I feel good about the line. I know Chad Baker missed one, which, goodness gracious, that's just about as rare as shooting 50%. But man, they turned it up today. I can imagine Bruce was telling them, get on the line and shoot some free throws. Auburn led by 19 at the half, 46-27. They shot 55% from the floor on the game, 33 of 60, which is a great number. It's the eighth time that Auburn has shot at least 50% this season. Unreal numbers scoring the basketball. And I mean, scoring was one thing, defense was another, but I was just wowed by Auburn scoring in the first half.
Yeah, we said against South Carolina, I said this last week, I think it was the worst first half of Auburn basketball we've seen all season. Coming into this game without Johni Broome, this was a great first half. And you mentioned offensively, I'm going to talk about defense. Josh Hubbard, who is Mississippi State's leading scorer, he averages 17 points per game, has made 53 points. He was on the SEC all-freshman team last season. He's second in the SEC in made three-pointers. In the first half, he had 7 points. None of those were from the floor. Those were all from the free throw line. He was 0 for 4 from the floor, 0 for 4 for 3. And that was because Denver Jones. Miles Kelly said it after the game. He said it's because Denver Jones has great instincts. And that is clear because Josh Hubbard is one of your favorite guards in college basketball. And he only had 7 points at halftime, all from the free throw line. He ended up having way more points. I think he had 17 points, but 11 points from the free throw lines. He was 2 for 12 from the floor, only made 2 threes. Those were his only made shots on the floor all game. So that is because he was guarded by Denver Jones. So talk about keeping Mississippi State's leading scorer to only two made threes and just on the free throw line the entire time. And then blocks. This was all throughout the broadcast. They kept calling it the block party. Auburn had 9 blocks at halftime. Mississippi State had 0. Auburn usually averages around 7 blocks per game. So they beat that before halftime. It was, I think, less than 16 minutes into the game, Auburn passed their blocks per game average. Mind you, without their leading blocker, Johni Broome. So not only guarding Josh Hubbard blocks, Auburn had 7 steals from Mississippi State's 4 steals in the first half. Mississippi State had 8 turnovers. Auburn had 5 turnovers. And Mississippi State ranks in the top 10 nationally in assisted turnover ratio in 7th, steals per game in 10th, and fewest turnovers 9th. So they're in the top 10 nationally in all 3 of those categories, and Auburn was able to beat them in all 3 of those categories. So you mentioned offensively, defensively, Auburn had a great performance in the first half.
And I started the show with saying Chad Baker-Mazara and Chaney was the newest duo on the block. Well, the block was a party today. Certainly. Chad Baker-Mazara and Dylan both with 2 blocks, Chaney Johnson with 4. It felt like anything in the paint was in grave danger. And it felt like that all night. It almost made Mississippi State a little nervous to bring it in, which I thought was a little surprising, especially without Johni Broome, arguably one of the nation's best shot blockers, which, granted, you're playing against the nation's best shot blocking team and one of the most athletic bigs in Dylan Cardwell, especially defensively. I wouldn't want to bring it in there. And I can understand why Josh Hubbard, who wasn't having a great game from the field and who stands at a stout 5'10", was not going to bring it into the paint. That's completely understandable. But that defense is scary. And when they get going, they're really, really good. I'm excited to see how they improve over SEC play because the competition is only going to get better. We've played a fantastic non-conference schedule against some of the best offensive teams in the country. And in a game like tonight where you're without Johni Broome, I feel like I'm going to say that after every single thing I say.
I think I was saying that when I was mentioning steals. I was like, I think every single thing we're going to say without Johni Broome. But it's true.
It's true. It adds, there's an added effect there for sure. But I mean, you did it in the non-conference with the guy. Now you have to do it without him. And arguably something that's harder than your non-conference when you play ranked teams literally every single week. I don't know that there's a week on our schedule at the moment where we don't play a ranked team. That's going to be absurd. Auburn's defense was on absolute fire tonight.
Chaney Johnson had 4 blocks. We had the 3rd straight game with a Denver Jones block. That is crazy. Since when did Denver Jones be able to jump so high?
Yeah, seriously. Vertical Jones. He was fantastic tonight as well. I thought he was the anchor of the defense. We talked about the block shots, and obviously that's a big, big piece of winning a basketball game and winning the paint, which Auburn absolutely lost against South Carolina. That's something we needed to improve on in a major way in this game. Certainly did. I felt like the rebounding aspect from the bigs and defense both contributed to just being on that side of the ball, rebounding. But the guards were the important piece in this game. Denver Jones, absolutely lockup. DJ lockup. That's what I kept saying during this game because he was. It was everywhere Josh Hubbard went. Oh, look who's behind you. It's like he was hanging on to Hubbard's tail. That's what it felt like all night. Josh Hubbard, he was feeling Denver Jones's effect all game. Hubbard had 0 points until the 5-minute, 24-second mark in the first quarter. It wasn't even a field goal either. It was a free throw. So he had no field goals in that time. And Denver had a sequence where he had the block on the break, which was awesome, first of all. That was pretty sweet. And then he had the layup moving down sort of the left lane line. And then he followed by having the dribble drive alley-oop to Dylan. Oh my gosh, the roof came off of Neville Arena. That was awesome. But it was another charge led by Denver Jones, excuse me. And when it was 27-18 too, like Denver had really, really added to that lead. He came off the screen from the left wing, moves all the way to the right lane in one dribble and 2 steps. So a legal move, moves to the right lane line, knocks down a 3, an extended sidestep, which I think is his favorite move. Like whenever he hits it, it's like cash. Like you want to just Venmo him because you already knew it was cash. But he hits it every single time, whether it's on the baseline, which is I think might be his favorite shot. He has that little turnaround on the baseline. It's like a stutter step into that baseline fadeaway. But this one is bound to be a close second because it's cash app every single time. He finished with 13 points. Obviously had another chase down block 3 games in a row of a SportsCenter highlight. Plus, he was a fast break starter all game long. And I know fast break starters on opposing teams absolutely hate to see Denver Jones coming in the rearview mirror. 2 steals, led the team defensively again. I thought it was another awesome game from Mr. Deuce.
Yeah, scoring in double digits again. 5 points first half, 8 points in the second half. Like we said, the second half was more Miles Kelly, Denver Jones, Tahad Pettiford, everyone really showing up throughout this game. And we talked about the block, but what I loved about that play was Mississippi State had a steal from Denver Jones right before, and he was able to run back to the other side of the court and get that block. So that's just showing he did not give up on the play, which we're never going to see that from Denver Jones not giving up. But that's what I loved most about that play was he was the one that lost the ball and he was the one that had that. It was more of a, he did that because he wanted, that highlight block because that is much of a way better play.
Never lacks fight. And I'm for sure when someone steals it, it gets absolutely personal for Denver Jones. And he certainly, he takes it out on the ball. Like if a guy brings the ball back and Denver's sending it, he wants to see how high I can bounce off the floor. That's what kind of defender Denver Jones is. And he wasn't the only one that was producing, not only on defense, he produced on offense too. Like I said, 13 points, but there was a lot of help from a couple of other all-star guards for the Auburn Tigers as well.
Miles Kelly also had 13 points, but this kind of shocked me. I know it's his first season as an Auburn Tiger, but he had his first double-double, 13 points, 10 rebounds. So that not only just talks about the progression of Miles Kelly, I think that also talks about the coaching of Bruce Pearl and this staff to get Miles Kelly to that level. He's always been a great scorer. He's the best 3-point shooter on the team. Georgia Tech, he was always the best 3-point shooter on that team. But this kind of shows the development of Miles Kelly throughout the season. You've talked about it. His defense has grown. We're seeing his rebounding has grown. And just 5 points first half, 8 points in the second half. And there was one sequence that I loved. It was Auburn had 7 straight points. Everyone went crazy. Dylan had the alley-oop, Chaney had the block, and then right away, Miles Kelly had the 3 in transition. I think the jungle went absolutely nuts, but just Miles Kelly being able to shoot the 3, being able to step up in the second half, having his first career double-double. And he kind of talked about all the rebounds. He said it was a huge emphasis. When we played South Carolina, we kind of got killed on the glass, which we mentioned. I think everyone mentioned. With Johni Broome being out, the guards had to rebound a lot. So I took it upon myself to stick my nose in there to get some of those. I knew it was needed for this game. Mississippi State is a physical team, so I knew it was huge for me to go down there and rebound. Miles Kelly, you rebounded.
Yeah, no, he certainly did. We had talked about his production in other stat categories over the last couple games, and when you need somebody to step up, it seems like he's been the consistent piece. And it was fantastic to see on the boards tonight, especially shorthanded at the big man position. And to see him get his first career double in the Auburn Tigers uniform was a fantastic feat. Love to see that from Miles. And hopefully there's a little more to come in that category as well. He scored in double figures for the 9th time this season. And he scored in double figures 59 times in his collegiate career. So him scoring a lot of points should be no shock to anybody watching. But I thought it was a fantastic game from him. He doesn't have to be the leader on offense, which I like. A lot of guys that are as skilled as Miles Kelly is and have had the experience that Miles Kelly did, say at Georgia Tech, where he was their leading scorer, they want the ball all the time. And Miles lets the game come to him, which I think in terms of a team perspective, you love to see that, because there's guys that aren't like that. There's stingy players. There's guys who want theirs, guys who want their threes, either guys who want their points. I really don't think Miles is like that. I think he takes his points. I don't think he gets them. I think when they come, he's going to make them. Yesterday in practice, the guy was shooting the lights out. He and Marquise Daniels were playing a game. See if he could hit 25 threes in less than a minute. 25 threes in less than a minute. He's nuts. He's shooting the ball like crazy right now. And I hope that trend continues. And there was a freshman too that wasn't too far behind.
No, I tweeted out, I was like, Miles Kelly shooting another 3 from Opelika. There was one, like, I think he was almost touching the logo. But another guy, Tahad Pettiford, he had 12 points. He has scored in double figures in every single SEC game so far this season. Freshman coming off the bench, scoring in double figures in every single SEC game in the hardest conference in SEC college basketball history. He was the one who stepped up in the second half. He was their leading scorer in the second half with 9 points. He had that insane viral windmill dunk that is all over social media. We're used to seeing those from Ja'Kai Howard, who is known for his dunks, but from Tahad Pettiford to have that windmill dunk. He started the second half with 9 straight points for Auburn. He was perfect from the floor, 4 for 4. So just talking about, like we said, Chad Baker-Mazara only had 2 points in the second half, but in the first half, but in the second half, we see all of these players step up, and Tahad Pettiford was the one to have 9 straight points for Auburn in the second half.
The whole game, I was looking for my big guard of the game moment. And although Chaney didn't have his usual, like, take it from the 3 and yam on somebody's head, and Dylan didn't have a moment where he had, like, his 44 moments where he's playing to the jungle, or he didn't have those offensive moments tonight, we're gonna have a different edition of the big guard of the game tonight, and we're gonna call it the offhand guard of the game, because every single dunk Tahad Pettiford has had that's big time has been with his right hand. He's a lefty, folks. He got up there with the right-handed windmill today. Took a nice look at how they made the rims when he got up there, because he had some time to spend. He got high up there, was looking in the rim. I mean, bouncy as ever. There's a lot of people I don't think that knows he has bounce like that.
Just talk about, now we've seen it from Tahad Pettiford, and we've seen Denver Jones go up for a block. We know Chaney can do it. Dylan, we know Janai can do it. Ja'Kai Howard can do it. Who on this team can't do it? We've seen Chad do it.
Who got no bounce?
I don't think anyone, like, what?
I don't think anybody has no bounce. But it was cool to see Tahad not only get the dunk, but also just see the way he played today. I was curious about how he would play in a big game at home, and he fulfilled all my expectations that I thought I would have for him. Obviously was able to light it up on offense, but he was another guy. When Denver Jones came out of the game, it's not like we saw much more from Josh Hubbard. He was somebody who Bruce called upon in the first couple of weeks of the season to really work on improving his defensive game. And I think with SEC play, he's had no choice but to do that. And especially in a game like Mississippi State that's ranked 15th in the country, they're very, very guard-led. Tahad has to step up or he won't see the floor as much. As frank as that sounds, that's how Bruce Pearl works. If you're not producing, he's not going to play you. But Tahad has really, really stepped up. We've seen him at end of games. We remember those games where they were close and Tahad Pettiford wasn't in the game. People really, really barked about the Duke game, how Tahad Pettiford wasn't in at the end of the game. South Carolina, he's the one hitting the free throws at the end of the game because he can play defense now too. And I think tonight he certainly did that. Josh Hubbard really had, the speed, the length, the ability to get in passing lanes and just frustrate him. He's just quick. He's so bouncy and fast and can catch and play with a guard like Hubbard. So defensively, I loved what I saw from Tahad in addition to his consistent offensive outpour on that end of the floor.
And a top 15 matchup against Mississippi State, who beat, mind you, South Carolina by 35, who we only beat by 3. We were able to put in Presley Patterson, Blake Muskelek, CJ Williams. So
Reed Trapp.
Retrap, can't forget about him either. But the fact we were able to put those guys in a top 15 matchup without Johni Broome, who played, I know we're saying it again. Sorry, listeners, but we're saying it again. So without Johni Broome at home, thank the jungle gave us that environment, able to put those guys in at the end of the game.
The good thing is the viewers are probably all asking the same question, especially if they didn't watch tonight. How in the world did we beat Mississippi State without Johni Broome? Well, the Tigers proved that they could beat a quality opponent without their number one man. And Bruce Pearl even said, like, everyone on this team will have to step up. And in Broome's absence, they did exactly that on Tuesday night. It was the 7th time the Tigers opened a season by winning at least 16 of their first 17 games, including the 3rd time in the last 8 seasons. That's a pretty crazy stat. And they also, as the number 1 seed in the country, the number 1 team in college basketball, they improved to 6-1 all time when ranked number 1 in the country. A pretty cool stat there for the newest number 1 in CBB.
Yeah, and next opponent, we travel to Athens, Georgia.
Trip
Number
down
20
Bulldawg Lane. Oh, no.
Number 23, Georgia. Georgia is ranked for the first time since 2011. And mind you, before we preview Georgia, I just want to bring up a little history.
Let's do it.
The last time Auburn was number 1 and traveled to Athens, Georgia, it was a close game. Auburn only won by 2, 74-72. And it was the KD Johnson legacy game. It was his return to Georgia after transferring. Transferring from Georgia, but that was the one that, remind you, I brought up the Mizzou game and the Georgia game. Those were the 2 games that gave Auburn fans shocking we were the number 1 team in the country. So we'll see again tonight. They proved that, they can play without Johni Broome, but at home, but we'll see if they can do it in a rowdy environment in Athens, in dog territory.
Yeah, and I know Auburn fans, you guys obviously remember the big moments. Last time we played at Georgia last year, don't forget it. Dylan Cardwell, he hit a 3. So you never quite know what to expect when the War Eagle rolls down Bulldawg Lane to go play Mike White and the Bulldogs, who I thought have really not had a bad performance this year. They've actually really, really impressed me. Despite their new floor, it's a little
hates
ugly.
Georgia's floor.
I think it's just a little ugly. I don't know why the lighting in there is the way it is, but they decided that the red Green Bay Packers logo in the middle would look better with a bulldog under it, which I'm not a fan. So I might have to refresh and go watch another game during commercial breaks, maybe something just to get that out of my head. I think it's an ugly court, but Georgia fans, bark at me if you want to. Their environment has been improving as well. I think students are starting to recognize that Mike White's the real deal coming from Florida. He didn't have the best time as the Florida head coach. They didn't do a whole lot, but I think it was also a learning experience for him playing in the SEC. He's taken a program like Georgia from literally nothing to something. I know they had their little Anthony Edwards moment in there with my former high school teammate, Stan Turnier, if you're listening. Played with Anthony Edwards. That's my guy. But they had that little moment, and then from there, they really haven't seen the light at the end of the tunnel very far. But since Mike White's gotten there, he's really helped to turn this Bulldog program around. So I'm very much looking forward to this game. That's going to be a tip-off at noon against the Bulldogs on SEC Network. I think it'll be a good game. The SEC, obviously, we know how the parity in that conference works and how it's been so far. But what do you think, Georgia-wise? Do you think they're the real deal?
I mean, they only had their 14-2 on the season. Their only 2 losses are to, at the time, number 15 Marquette and number 24 Ole Miss. Marquette, who is ranked right now and who is below us in quad 1 wins, but not by much. And Ole Miss, who just beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. They've beaten number 6 Kentucky by 13 at home, and they just beat number 17 Oklahoma at home.
Yeah.
So I mean, they don't have a bad loss, and they have a really good win against Kentucky, a really good Kentucky team. So I feel like they are ranked now, ranked for the first time since 2011, like I said, but I don't know. They play Tennessee Wednesday, so I guess that'll be kind of the preview to see how that game looks. But this Georgia team, I said it against Mississippi State, and we won by 22. So maybe if I say it against Georgia, we'll win by 22 too. This Georgia team, they don't have a bad loss, and they have a really good win against Kentucky. They have an insane freshman, Asa Newell, who is their leading scorer and rebounder. He averages 15 points per game and nearly 7 rebounds. He's a freshman. He was a 5-star. He is 6'11". So Auburn has had trouble with big guys in Texas against South Carolina. Those Colin Murray Boyles and Arthur Klumer caused trouble. And for Georgia's leading scorer to be a 6'11" guy, I think that could smell trouble for Auburn. I'm hoping it doesn't, but it very well could. They also have RJ Godfrey, who transferred from Clemson, who he visited Auburn, has a good relationship with Bruce Pearl, almost came to Auburn from the transfer portal. So I said this against Mississippi State, but I think it has the potential to be a good game because it is in Athens. And like I said, they really don't have a bad loss.
Yeah, it's hard to almost say it's not going to be a tough game because that environment is one that's improving. We saw the Kentucky game. That was really telling to me because Kentucky's a team. I know they're a second half team, but they got down in the first half and weren't able to recover, which is something we hadn't seen from Mark Pope's Wildcats much this year. And I guess a look around the SEC too while we're at it. Kentucky, number 8 team in the country. The Wildcats beat Texas A&M tonight, 81-69 behind a big game. 22 points, 8 rebounds from Jackson Robinson, who's finally turning it up a little bit. He had a great game against Mississippi State on Saturday. So maybe that's a turning point for the Wildcats heading into the depths of SEC play. Also, Ole Miss, number 21 in the country, Chris Beard and company went to Tuscaloosa and had a big 10-point win against the Crimson Tide. They moved to 14-3, 3-1 in the SEC. Ole Miss, another undefeated team. I think they're very comparable to that of Georgia. People don't really trust them yet. I think they're a team that's on the up and up, a little bit under the radar. And at the moment, the Missouri Tigers are beating the Florida Gators 75-70 with 2:55 to play. Now, if you're listening to this tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, you'll have your answer whether or not Missouri got their second big upset of the year. They beat Kansas earlier in the year and had the most aesthetically pleasing court storming I think I had seen in college basketball. So hopefully they have another big one tonight. Also, just across college basketball, a great night of games. I mean, holy smokes.
Marquette
Turn on
game.
all TVs you got because there's something to watch. Number 3 Duke handled Miami. Miami's god awful, 0-6 in the ACC, 4-13 on the year, 89-54. Colin Knippel leading the way with 25. Wisconsin beat Ohio State, an Ohio State team that's beat some great teams, lost to some great teams. Auburn. They lost to Wisconsin 70-68. Illinois absolutely throttled Mike Woodson in Indiana, an Indiana team that was on the up and ups a little bit, supposedly has reached rock bottom in one game. And Marquette, that DePaul game, that was just a thriller. 85-83 fell in Marquette's favor in overtime. That was a fantastic one as well in the Big East. But a great game, great day of basketball all around. Your Auburn Tigers come out with an 88-66 win without their star guy, Johni Broome. That's going to be the last time I say it tonight. A great win for the newly ranked number 1 Auburn Tigers.
You know it is a good day when Auburn basketball wins and Alabama loses. I would say my biggest fear was Auburn loses and Alabama wins, which would have meant Alabama was the only undefeated team in the SEC. Well, guess what? Auburn won and Alabama lost. So that was in a perfect world, and it happened. Ole Miss wins for the first time in a decade in Tuscaloosa. It's their first ever road win against a top 5 opponent. They had 34 losses. Now they have 1 win. And they kept Georgia to a team that, not Georgia. They kept Alabama to a team that averages 91 points per game. They kept them to 64. So Terrence Oglesby said Ole Miss is the team to watch out for in the SEC when we talk to him. So that's definitely something to look out for. But all I have to say is Auburn basketball won and Alabama basketball lost. So
yep. And now there's only 2 remaining undefeated teams in the SEC, that being Auburn and the Ole Miss Rebels. And now there's 2 teams at 3-1 as well, with Alabama and Kentucky. Florida on the hot seat right now, 2-1. They could be 2-2 by the end of the night. We shall see. But either way, it's a great night to be on the plains of Auburn University as they walked away with a big win over number 15 Mississippi State. Jojo Cavanagh, do you have anything else for us tonight?
Be sure to check out, we will have our recap of Auburn in Athens out to you. And we're back in Auburn, like we said. So we have another interview coming up. We are interviewing the best 3-point shooter on Auburn's team, maybe in college basketball, Miles Kelly. So he will be coming on Straight Out the Jungle with us. We are so excited to release that one to you guys as our next guest. But from Auburn, Alabama, I'm JoJo Cavanagh.
I'm excited to talk to Mr. Call God, Miles Kelly, MK13, the double-double machine. I'm ready for it. From Auburn, Alabama, I'm Vince Wolfram. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Straight Out the Jungle. We will see you guys Saturday after Auburn versus Georgia. It's going to be a great one. We'll see you guys next time. War Eagle.
War Eagle.